You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I want to wish you all a very happy new year. 2026 has arrived. It will probably come as no surprise to you that I have always been someone who loves New Year's Eve. Not for the glitzy parties, those days are sadly behind me, but for the resolutions. To me, the new year is a blank page full of promise and potential, as am I within it. It's practically a second Christmas for us type A list-making eldest daughters, a holiday that encourages us to set and tackle goals with color-coded determination. So for today's episode, it's going to be a look back and a look forward. After combing through all of the incredible guests we had on Sweet Success in 2025, I pulled out some of my favorite moments and reframed them as my top 10 New Year's resolutions for 2026. Each one inspired by the wisdom, perspective, and lived experiences of these incredible guests. So without further ado, let's get into the resolutions. Counting down from resolution number 10, do things you're afraid of. This one comes from episode 32, The Untold Story of Travel's Biggest Disruptor, The Points Guy with Brian Kelly. I really appreciated Brian's honesty about fear. He's someone who comes across as completely confident, polished on camera, articulate in interviews, and an absolute pro with press. But he shared how terrified he was during his very first TV appearance and how he learned to push through the discomfort anyway. What struck me most was his reminder that confidence doesn't come before you try something scary. It comes after. Let's hear from Brian.
But then I started doing media. So shortly after, in 2011, I got a New York Times article written about me that changed my life. And another tip I like to give founders is always go through your spam inbox. Because I've had certain emails or chance encounters sitting on a plane with people that will change your life. The New York Times, Seth Kugel, the frugal travel columnist in 2011, who I have a huge following. I loved his content. He had emailed me and it sat in spam for a month. And I'm going through, and this is right after I started making a little bit of money on affiliate marketing. And he said, I'm the frugal travel columnist, budget travel. I don't believe in points. And that's what I tell my following, just buy the cheapest ticket. And these points programs are not worth it. Yeah. So I met with him, changed his whole thought process on points. And he was able to visit his girlfriend who lived in Brazil at the time. And I just remember his face lit up and he was like quaking. He's like, wait a minute, I can visit my girlfriend next week for free? Like, this is game changing. So
it's more than frugal.
Yeah. So then I started learning about brands. So I started doing, and I remember my first CNN segment, but then it's, as you very well know, the power of PR. So that all of a sudden, and I love speaking with people. I love, going on TV. Now I'm much more used to it, but I mean, it would scare the shit out of me. I remember before going live, just shaking and like, okay, don't mess this up. And, for anyone out there you have to leverage media smartly. It can be the biggest driver of your brand. That was like really what supercharged the business. And yeah, so it's been a very interesting journey of Brian Kelly, who is the points guy, and people call me the points guy, but then all of a sudden I have a bunch of other employees and other writers, and I just always in the back of my head thought about those people originally who are like, you'll never be able to scale this because you're the points guy. You'll never be able to sell this business because who would buy it? But yeah, so it's been an interesting, I sold the business in 2012. It got purchased again in 2017. I'm still a part of it. I also think calling it the points guy has been my biggest asset, because most entrepreneurs, you sell the business, you walk away, you don't really have value once the other company takes it over. But
Right.
building a personal brand alongside the brand has been one of the smartest business decisions I've ever made, because I'm known as Brian Kelly, the expert who helps the points guy and is the points guy, but it's kind of we're both of us are more powerful together. So it's been really interesting for me. Many times I'm like, well, I sold my company. Should I walk away? But I'm purpose driven. Like, I love walking away from like getting to help people and make money and do what I love. Like, why would I ever leave? So it's been an interesting, being linked with this brand, for better or worse.
And how do you delineate between the two now? Who is Brian Kelly and who is the points guy? And then obviously, as you said, you come together.
We come together. We do it. It's really interesting. Reinvention is the parent company that owns the points guy now. I think they were, I was CEO of the points guy when they bought it in 2017. I had no, I wanted to stay. And clearly, when we did the deal, it was for me to stay on. And I still have multi-year deals to kind of work together. So we're always in sync. Like, when I rise, they rise, right? And I know a lot of people have sold companies where there's always friction of like, when are we going to cut this person out, right? So it does take trust, and trusting the people that you do business with, because it can, you can sometimes look over your shoulder and be like, wait a minute, am I being, because you can see in business, it might be cheaper to cut me out. And so, but back to your original question of what's Brian, what's the points guy? I mean, I think we're synonymous. So I also need to keep that in mind. With what I share on my personal Instagram could have very serious repercussions for the points guy. And we work with top tier companies, Chase, American Express, Capital One. These are like companies where you really have to have a good reputation. So I remember once I even cursed in a Vice article. They interviewed me, and I was feeling a little fun and spicy that day. And I remember hearing from PR people at one of the big banks that were like,
next time, don't do it. Interesting.
This can create heat, because we want, and it was like such a learning moment for me. Like, Brian Kelly and the points here, we are sort of the same. So you gotta, it's an interesting way to live your life when you are a personal brand and a person.
Yeah.
And a company too.
Yeah. It goes back to what you were saying too about the first few times that you were doing TV appearances and feeling really nervous, which I think is so refreshing to hear, because you are such a seasoned pro at media interviews now. But it's nice to hear at some point you were nervous just like the rest of us, right?
Here are the tips, everyone out there. Number one, you just need to keep doing it. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get good at it. You have to watch yourself, which I know we all hate doing. And if you don't watch yourself and don't look down and cringe watching, look at yourself. And I remember I would always, because I was so excited too, I would be nodding my head. The host would be asking me a question. I'm sitting there like, like excited to answer. And I'm like, oh my God, I look like a horse right now. Like, and what, most importantly, if you want to do this seriously, get media training. I very early on, there was a media training company in Chicago. I went for 2 days, and it was former journalists, radio hosts. They had me in different formats in a studio. We would watch, they would give me tips. And the biggest thing you learn is, especially in travel, like I'm coming in as the expert, fun tips, give the audience some meat, something they're going to learn, and just get out of your head that you're going to fail. I mean, that's everything in life, dating, business. But seriously, the minute you just stop telling yourself, well, what if I'm asked a question I don't know the answer to? Like, stop. You're an expert. You're there for a reason. Have fun. And also stop trying to give away a million stats. No one is listening. No one has a piece of paper. Give the high level, juicy, and just have fun, So it took many years to do that. I started doing press in 2011. But now I try to just remind myself, like, have fun with this, connect with the host and listen to what they're saying. And it's okay to banter and go back and forth.
Next up, resolution number 9. Don't worry about exactly where you're headed or what you're doing. Just keep taking the next right step. This one comes to us from episode number 43, Why Every City is a Food City, according to Top Chef's Gail Simmons. I loved getting to chat with Gail and was so impressed to learn that she didn't set out to become a television icon. She did know that she wanted to be in food media from the start, but she didn't know exactly how to get there or even what there would look like. So when someone told her she needed more culinary credibility, she went to culinary school. She worked in 2 notoriously tough kitchens. She invested her time, her money, and her full belief in the vision she had for herself, even without a guaranteed outcome. Let's hear how Gail explains her own career trajectory.
I grew up in Canada, in Toronto. I went to McGill University and started really getting into food in my last year of college, which, wasn't really a thing at the time. I mean, the Food Network was in its nascency and it wasn't on my radar. But what became on my radar was other forms of food media, food magazines, which until that time in my life were really like my mom's magazines. My mom was actually an incredible cook, home cook, but ahead of her time. And she ran a little cooking school out of our home for women and men in our neighborhood at a time when like people were trying to make food as convenient as possible in the home so that they could get out of the kitchen. My mom was kind of like leaning in and still really believed in cooking from scratch and cooking simply and thoughtfully and home, being a talented home cook and entertainer. And so that was always in my consciousness, I guess, but I never thought of it as a career, even though that was so much of what my mom did at the time. And it was only after I graduated from college that I thought that I wanted to work in the food world, but specifically, I never wanted to be a chef, and that remains true. My idea then, which I did manifest in hindsight, was that I wanted to be in food media. But at the time, food media, the word media really meant one thing. It meant print publications. So my, very lofty dreams were to go work for a food magazine, to go work at Gourmet Magazine or Food Wine Magazine or one of those very glamorous places and be a food critic, quote unquote. But I really didn't know what a food critic was. Like I didn't know that much about food. I just knew I liked to cook and I liked to eat. And it was sort of that simple. So naive and sweet of me, but I guess that's how it should be at that stage in your life, your career, right? Your dreams, you still have big dreams and are trying to figure out how to make them come true. So I moved back from college and I did love writing and I wanted to write and travel and cook and eat. And so I got a job very luckily at a local city magazine in Toronto called Toronto Life, which is sort of like New York Magazine or Los Angeles Magazine, excellent, high quality city magazine. And I was an intern there. And then I went on to be an assistant at a big national newspaper in Canada. And each time I was drawn to the food critic and tried to get them to let me write about food and trail them and follow them and learn about what it meant to be a food writer. Until finally an editor said to me, here's the thing, kid, you don't know anything about food. I mean, anyone can be a writer. You can train yourself to write. But if you want to own a category, if you want to find your gig, your niche, you need to learn about that first to write about it with any type of authority. So if food is your thing, if that's your beat, go learn how to cook, go become fluent in that language. It's like if you want to be a war reporter, you can't do it from your couch. You got to go to the front lines. And that was sort of the excuse I needed. It was the advice I needed to give me permission to sort of quit the job and leave home and venture into the world to learn to do just that. And it was the excuse I needed to move to New York City because it was, for me, the culinary capital of the world, not just from a restaurant and food perspective, but from being, at that time, really the epicenter of food media, because that's where all the big food magazines and newspapers were in the New York Times, obviously dining section. And, there weren't blogs. There wasn't really social media at that time. It was really about print.
Yeah.
And, so I packed up and I moved to New York City, and I need to skip ahead a little bit because we're going to be here all day. But ultimately I enrolled in culinary school. And I took it very seriously that if I was going to be a food writer, I needed to learn about food. And so I needed to go to school for it. And I considered going to culinary school like my master's degree, right? I enrolled in professional culinary school. I was there for a year. I went to do an apprenticeship, when I was done. And I at first wanted to, go work in the test kitchen of Gourmet Magazine as an apprentice. But my school convinced me that I still didn't know about, I wasn't a cook. I wasn't a chef. I wasn't an expert yet. Go cook in a restaurant, because that's where you learn really what the industry's like. And if you want to, again, write about it, you need to be on the inside. And it was the hardest but smartest piece of advice anyone's given me, and thing I've ever done. I worked in 2 very ambitious kitchens at the time in New York City, and they completely flattened me. Hardest jobs, as a kind of lowly line cook, but incredibly rewarding in terms of what I learned and gained from those experiences. And then after several months of cooking as a cook, I went back to that original mission and said, okay, I feel like I've gotten some experience here. It's time to go back to that media idea, because I still never wanted to cook professionally. I wanted to get back to writing. And I got a job first for 2 years working as the assistant to the food critic at Vogue magazine, which was an incredible job for one of the greatest writers of our time, long format magazine writer, exceptional, brilliant man, Jeffrey Steingarten. And I did everything for him. I tested recipes and I did research and I, ran around New York City discovering ingredients and speaking with chefs and interviewing people. And it really was an amazingly informative job that gave me access and introductions to every major chef in New York City, in the country, in the world. Jeffrey would go to Paris for months, and I would do research on the restaurants he was going to. And then all those chefs would come back and be in our kitchen with us, and I could cook with Pierre May, and I could, I met all these incredible people. And from there, I went to work for Danielle Boulou for several years in marketing and PR. And it was through Danielle that I met the people at Food and Wine magazine. And a job became available at Food and Wine after 3 years of me working for Danielle, which was also like an MBA in kind of behind the scenes of running fine dining restaurants. And I loved that job and I loved working for him. But again, wanted to get back to that mission of print and writing. And so when a job came available at Food and Wine, I grabbed it. And I was at Food and Wine, grabbed it, meaning begged for it, and got it finally. And went to work at Food and Wine, running. At first, I was working in the marketing department, actually. And within a year, I took over the biggest event of their year, running the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen. And at that exact same time, at the exact same time that I took that job, another huge thing happened. Bravo came to Food and Wine magazine, to our publisher and our editor-in-chief, and said, we have this idea for a show that's never been done before about the real lives of cooks and the restaurant industry. And we want to make a food competition that kind of throws open the door to the kitchen, the professional kitchen, but also discovers new talent and sort of exalts and gives opportunity to young chefs in the industry. And it sounded like a crazy idea because there was nothing like it at the time. Remember, we're talking 2005. There was Iron Chef Japan, the only food competition that existed at the time. And that was an extreme. And then the other reality TV that was on back then had nothing to do with food. In fact, it was like Survivor and Fear Factor. So for me, the points of reference for reality competitions were very, very different, right? It was the beginning of that genre of television. And when I heard about the opportunity, my boss, the publisher, came to me and said, I'd had a lot of PR experience having worked for Danielle Boulou, and they had put me through some media training, and I had started doing a little bit of media work, front of camera work on behalf of Food and Wine when they needed someone on the Today Show or local news talking about food trends or making a summer peach tart, because I had the culinary experience and the PR experience. I had, a little bit of on-camera experience, but this was also so completely secondary to my main job. The thought of doing anything more, public facing, camera facing wasn't even in my purview. I mean, I was happy. I'd reached my goal, right? I was working in a major food publication. I was running the greatest food event in America. I was working with the best chefs around the country. Like, I was there. I was done. I was happy as a clam. And so when they asked me to go sort of temporarily on this lark to represent Food and Wine on this new food show, it really was an afterthought to me. It was just this idea that I was going to go. And I think my publisher and editor-in-chief felt the same to some degree. Not to diminish it, but we just had no idea what we were doing.
Right.
It was really out of left field. And I went to San Francisco to shoot that first season of Top Chef, really thinking I'd go for 3 weeks, do this for Food and Wine because they'd asked me to represent the magazine on this television show. And then I'd come back and go back to my job and like the rest of my life and just continue on. Never did I think that 20 years later, I'd still be making the show and the show would evolve in the way it has, and that it would really change the course of my career in so many ways that I could have never imagined.
Next up, resolution number 8, take the harder path now for a more rewarding future. This one comes to us from episode 38, A Life Rewritten After Tragedy, Weekender Hotel's CEO on sentencing, sobriety, and starting over with Keir Weimer. Keir inspired this resolution when he said the alternative to doing this is waking up in a life that reflects someone else's definition of success. His story is a powerful reminder that avoiding hard work or hard truths doesn't actually make life easier, it just postpones the reckoning. Keir also shared practical exercises we all can use to get clearer on what we actually want. Let's hear it in his own words.
Obviously, I had a lot of time on my hands when I was away, and I had a lot of reflecting and self-introspection and had the wherewithal. And grateful that I had the self-awareness to really like zoom out and almost disassociate with myself and my life from before, and then see what was wrong with that. How did I get there? How did that happen under my watch? And then where did I want to go in life? And what was the deficit? Like, what was the gap? Like, what was I going to need to do as a person to change, to get over here or from here? Right. So there's all that, I think step one is seeing like, what's the divide? Like, are you, meaning like, is anybody in this, walk of life? If you're in a place now where you're not fully activated, fully happy, fully aligned, fully in purpose or in what you feel is your, soul, God-given, whatever you want to call it, reason for being here, meaning you're activated, excited every day about what you're doing work-wise, you're in fulfilling relationships, you're surrounded by great people. If that's not you, which is most people is not there, then I think doing this exercise of just self-reflection and, getting a journal out, writing down some of the things that, are maybe not a 10, right? Or that you're not super happy with, or that you want to grow in. And then starting to like get clear on the destination. That's super important. So I think a lot of people work really, really hard. They have great intentions. They're super smart, but they're doing like all the things that they think they should be doing, or that like school, society, parents like tell them is success, or like what a good life looks like. And then they get to be like 35, 40, sometimes later 45. And they're like, crap, I built all this stuff and now I feel like I'm living in somebody else's reality or somebody else's version of success, or I'm in my own version of a prison.
Right.
And I think that's tragic. And I think it happens all the time. So I think getting real about where you're at and where you want to go is critical. And that means getting really creative and really honest about like filling and coloring out a destination that like is happiness for you. So what does that look like? Who are you surrounded with? Where do you live? What does your day look like? What does your wealth and contribution look like? Getting clear on that is like step one, right? And then being super honest and accountable about where you're at today, because only then can you know what's the delta look like. What is it going to take from getting where I'm at today to this like ideal picture of life and happiness for me? That is like, I would say, probably the most important exercise I can recommend, which is just getting clarity around that.
But I imagine when you first did that exercise, you weren't like, create the world's best outdoor hospitality brand.
Yeah.
So the little steps along the way, is it just following those little signs and those things that are the 10 out of 10s and are making you happy and guiding you there, and eventually trusting that you're going to end up in the spot that you are meant to be.
Good point. It's definitely not like you're not going to always know, or shall I say, your destination won't always be fixed or static, and it shouldn't be. It should evolve as your life evolves, as you grow, and as your ambition grows. But that said, I think your values should stay pretty consistent, right? So I think getting clear on what your values are, what do you stand for, what are yeses, what are, hell yeses, and what are no's and hell no's. What are those like non-starters, non-negotiables for you? That helps you create what I would call like a decision and filtering matrix from which you will allow things into your world in orbit and you will prevent things from entering. That's really important. Most people are not super clear on that. And that just takes some time, right? That takes some introspection, some self-reflection, and it also takes some feedback. So a very tactical exercise that you could do to understand more about, your values and yourself. If you're having trouble being like super honest, and it is tough to like think about and talk about ourself and, those things that are most important sometimes are like our character predispositions, is what I found is find, let's say, 5 people that will not lie to you, that'll just tell you the truth, that are good friends from childhood, people you've known for a while, that will just tell it like it is, and ask them to spend 5 minutes, write you a short paragraph on like the things that basically they first think of when they think of you. So what are the things that they think of when they think of you, right? So what are the things that you're best at? What are the things that you're most known for? What are some of the character strengths? And then also on the other side, what are some of the things that they think you could work on? And tell them to give them permission to be super honest and transparent with you, because you're looking to grow from this. That's why you're asking them to do this. It's not a critique. It's a feedback loop. And do it with people that you are safe with, safe space, totally honest, and give them the permission to be honest. That right there will give you invaluable feedback that maybe can identify some blind spots you're not even aware of.
Moving on to resolution number 7, don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. This one is pulled straight from episode 49, The Travel Secrets Only an Editor-in-Chief Knows, with Travel and Leisure's Jackie Gifford. Jackie reminded us that reinvention isn't a failure, it's a feature. She was someone who excelled in math but chose to study English. She didn't set out to become a journalist. She never planned to work in travel. And yet today, she's editor-in-chief of one of the most trusted travel media brands in the world. Proof that your route doesn't have to be set from day one. Let's hear her tell her story.
Growing up abroad was, without a doubt, one of the most formative things of my life. My father was working abroad, and for a company, we were fortunate enough to travel to so many different places. But yes, I was born in Japan, 1980, dating myself, but that's fine. And I was born in a typhoon. My mother always tells me it was typhoon number 19, and the water was coming in from under her hospital door. It was really fascinating to live in Japan. I lived there twice, actually, once in the early 80s and then back in the mid 90s. And no one actually really visited us. My grandmother came to visit us, and one friend from Bucks County came. But actually, I love Japan deeply. And it was so interesting to live in Tokyo and get used to living in a major city like that and not speaking the language. I took a little Japanese, but it never stuck. And now to see that, wow, Japan is on the top of every American traveler's list. It just never was before. And I went again this year, and it was amazing to see how many Americans were interested in going. And then living in the Middle East was so incredible because I really fell in love with the culture and the people. And living in Saudi Arabia, it was actually less conservative back then. It became more conservative, and now it's opening up to tourism. So I went back for the first time in 2022 after it had opened to tourists. And that was incredible. I never thought I'd be able to go back. And it was just as memorable and beautiful and all of the things. But, without a doubt, and then living in Philadelphia and Bucks County and then living in New York, without a doubt, traveling at a young age really made me a more tolerant and empathetic person.
Why did you guys live so many different places?
My father worked for Mobil Oil. And so the reason we would travel, we would oftentimes go to a place where there was oil, whether that was the Middle East or my parents, before I was born, lived in Texas and California. They lived in France. But then we would often live in a place where, there was work done that was supportive of the industry. So in Japan, there were several companies that they worked with, and we would live there for a couple of years and move somewhere else for a couple of years. But and then we lived in Philadelphia just because there was an office there, but an office nearby. But the really interesting part of it was that, when you're an expat and you're a kid growing up and you go to the American schools, and they're really fascinating because there's not just Americans, there's kids from the local community, there's kids from other countries that just wanted to have an American education. So actually, I met kids from all over the world, even though, you live in Qatar, but actually I met kids from France, from Canada, from Brazil. They're just all living there. And actually, it was really quite special.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a mini UN in your classroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
With your background, I mean, it feels like you were destined to work in the travel industry.
I guess.
When you chose to study English at Princeton, was it with the goal of being in travel media one day?
No, never.
Wow.
There was never a goal even to work in journalism. So it's so funny. I was actually a better math student than I was English student. I love math, and I was a good English student, and I love to read, and I'm still a voracious reader, but I was never necessarily like, I'm going to work in journalism. I want to be a reporter. There was never sort of a grand plan. And I fell into English at school and college, and I then ended up finding and carving a path through in media, but I was never Princeton didn't have a journalism school, and I never went to journalism school. I never set out to do it. It just happened. And I never specifically thought I'd work in travel journalism. It wasn't a dream. I think it happened organically, and I'm thrilled that it did. But I always say, and even just coming out of the summit that we just had a thought leadership event, people reinvent themselves all the time, and there's second, third, fourth, fifth careers for us all. And so who knows where, anybody can find a path if they're passionate about something. But oftentimes, it's not the first thing you set out to do.
And now we're talking about resolution number 6, leave space for the unexpected. This comes from episode 29, how this accidental hotelier rebuilt the rainforest and was voted number 1 in the world with Leo Gittes, owner of Nayara Resorts. A theme that surfaced repeatedly in our conversation was what Leo called accidents of life, the moments or opportunities we can't predict or plan for, but somehow guide us to exactly where we're meant to be. Instead of forcing certainty along the way, Leo stayed curious. He learned, he adapted, and in doing so, look at what he managed to create. Let's hear from Leo.
Real estate was an accident of life. I didn't choose to go into real estate. Real estate chose me. As I was graduating from business school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was recruited at Harvard by a wonderful company called Trammell Crow. Trammell Crow company still exists, but it was acquired by C.B. Richard Ellis. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I knew I wanted to move to someplace warm. I was living in Boston and was very cold. I used to get sick all the time with those winters. And I wanted to move south. And Trammell Crow offered me an opportunity to come work in the Miami area. And it was a wonderful company, still is an amazing company. And I'll be forever grateful for the opportunity they gave me. I ended up working for them for 10 years. I became a partner in the firm, and they taught me everything I know about real estate. And when Trammell Crow went public, I decided that I didn't want to work for a huge public company. So I started my own company. And over the years, it's been a lot of years, close to 40 years, I've developed properties or invested or purchased companies pretty much along the East Coast of the US. Different kinds of properties, industrial parks, office buildings, apartment communities, self-storage. I mean, a bunch of different things.
Wow. And are those types of projects what you had been working on for the 10 years prior to the company going public?
Yes.
Okay.
I run the office industrial group for Tremble Grove for South Florida. And and like everybody at Tremble Grove back then, I started as a leasing agent. I used to lease properties almost door to door. And eventually they gave me the opportunity to become a partner with the firm. Again, something that I'm very grateful for. And I started with nothing. And thanks to Tremble Grove, I was able to build a little net worth, which allowed me to branch into my real passion now, which is sustainable hospitality.
Wow. So was that always the North Star for you? Was it always something in the back of your head that you're like, one day, once I have money saved, I'm going to do this? Or was it as you progressed through your career, through your life, that you started to think, I think I actually want to go into hospitality as opposed to just straightforward real estate?
It's another accident of life. I was born and raised in a city in Colombia called Cali.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved, I moved to the States when I was fairly young. When my children became a little older, teenagers, they wanted to go visit Cali. And back then, sadly, Cali had become very dangerous. I mean, you've probably seen all of these Netflix episodes about Cali during those years. And we couldn't go to Cali. So a good friend of ours, which was a neighbor at that time, is from Costa Rica. And she said, why don't you come? She understood that my children wanted to go to Colombia, to Cali, and that we couldn't take them because it was dangerous. So she said, why don't you come to Costa Rica? Costa Rica looks just like Colombia, but it's completely and totally safe. So we, with our 3 children, we went to Costa Rica. And it was love at first sight. And I'm going to confess something that now is a little embarrassing. I had never heard the word sustainability.
Wow.
And I didn't know anything about that. And we spent a week in Costa Rica. And we discovered a new world. I truly love and admire deeply Costa Rica, because the term green was known in Costa Rica before it became part of our lexicology. Costa Rica care about the environment before we all spoke about it. And the story is remarkable. In 1940, 75% of Costa Rica were forests. 40 years later, most of those forests had disappeared.
Wow.
One of the fastest deforestation of any country in the world. And what makes Costa Rica, what sets Costa Rica apart is that the country realized what was happening, and they came together and they made a decision as a country, as a community, that they needed to reverse that.
In
1980, I think 40 years later, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. I think 80% of Costa Rica was already covered with forest.
Wow.
It was a decision that the government and the people made. Costa Rica is now one of the greenest countries in the world. 25% of the country is set aside for national parks. When I went to Costa Rica, and Costa Rica was in the middle of that reforestation project. And the nature guides that we work with that show the country told us about that, and it was truly inspiring. And at that point, I said, I want to be part of this story.
Yeah.
And I started looking for an opportunity to get involved in anything that had to do with sustainability. And hopefully later in your program, I'll be able to talk a little bit about my sustainability journey.
That would be amazing. I mean, let's jump in right now. I read that you really kind of started in terms of the Nayara story during the Great Recession. You got involved with a small 24-room, 3-star hotel in Costa Rica. Is that the beginning of your sustainability journey too, or did that even start before that?
Yes, look, that's how it started. I went back to the U.S. and always thinking about Costa Rica. Always thinking, how can I give back? How can I give my life a little bit more meaning? And always looking for what could I do in Costa Rica. And I was very, very fortunate that a cousin of my father-in-law had started with 5 other partners a little project in the rainforest in Costa Rica. And at a certain point, as he was finishing his hotel with his partners, he offered me the opportunity to get involved. And I jumped at the opportunity. And over time, my father-in-law's cousin is called Angelo, and he's one of my closest friends in the world. And he retired a few years ago, but he taught me a lot of the things that I know now. And all of the partners either decided that they wanted to move on, so I ended up buying them. One of the original 6 partners, who is someone that I admired deeply. He was a young person when we got involved. I think he was between 20 and 25 years old. A remarkable person, really extraordinary partner, who grew up with nothing and is now one of the most important businessmen in the area where the hotel is, or perhaps all of Costa Rica.
Wow.
So that's how I got involved in the hotel business. Again, a complete accident of life.
Okay, we're at the halfway point now. Resolution number 5, invest in transferable skills. This one comes from episode 51, how living in 7 countries made this CEO a master of transferable skills, with the CEO of Iberostar Hotels and Resorts, Phil Macavity. Phil's career and his largely expat life is proof that transferable skills are everything. It's what allowed him to thrive while living in 7 different countries across 4 continents, even though he's the first to admit he's, quote, not good at languages. It's what allowed him to shift industries, moving from advertising to sports to hospitality to retail. And it's what enabled him to evolve personally, from a man whose mom would pester him about settling down to a devoted partner and a dad to 2 boys. It's a reminder that titles matter less than capabilities. Let's listen in.
I think it, to some degree, doesn't matter where you started your career or what you're doing, because at a certain point, it's really about transferable skills. And my sense is the most important transferable skill is being able to build teams and manage teams. And so whether you started building teams in an advertising agency or on the marketing side, you can build teams and manage people and connect across any part of the business. Look, I did, evolve. I mean, from, if you think about my time at Nike, for instance, I mean, it was more of a pure brand marketing role. It was very communications, sponsorship, comms led. Moving to Starwood was, a real eye-opener because it became about the whole experience, the whole customer experience, guest experience, the design, the architecture, the service culture, distribution before travel, loyalty after travel. And so it was a much, much wider landscape to work on, bringing together people with very, very different skills, and of course, connecting into the operational side of the business.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, in the hotel business, the truth of the experience lives in the hotel stay.
Yeah.
The truth of the brand, lives in the hotel stay.
Yeah, you can have the best marketing, collateral, advertising, but if it doesn't deliver,
absolutely
you're not coming back.
And so you have to work closely on the operations side. Look, I remember when I was moving on from Starwood thinking, go back into the brand side of things, brand marketing side of things. And I was a little bit worried because, having been out of that for some time, I thought, how are people going to look on the hotel industry? Because it's not that they do often leading advertising campaigns or communications campaigns. And the reality was that something had changed. Everyone I spoke to was actually less interested in that sort of classic Nike marketing background and more interested in guest experience, because every business was really starting to think about customer experience. And in fact, the reason, I landed in Australia and worked with the biggest retail group in Australia was they were looking for someone with hotel hospitality experience to build their brand.
Right.
So I think by giving yourself different experiences in different industries, different businesses, different geographies, obviously, you learn how to hopefully work well with different people, pull people together. And I believe that's a transferable skill that you can take into the C-suite or CEO role. I mean, the reality, I think, always is I'm surrounded by people, and I've always been surrounded by people who know their area much better than I do. And you need to have some level of respect for that.
Yeah.
Particularly in the hospitality business, I know when I joined Starwood, I had a learning curve, and the respect I developed for the operations people, because, they're the real deliverers of the brand, the real deliverers of the experience. And most of the people I dealt with, the general managers, the regionals, whatever, they'd forgotten more about hospitality than I was ever going to know.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out, what is it new I can hopefully bring to the table and move us forward.
Yeah, I felt that in Starwood as well. I had come from outside of the industry as well, and I needed to learn the industry. But what I felt was so evident at headquarters was that we all really knew we were here because of the hotels. It was not the hotels bow to corporate. It was almost corporate bows to the hotels, because that's not only where our money is being made, but where the guest experience is actually like the rubber meets the road.
Look, I think one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given was by, he was the leader of Europe at the time, a guy called Roland Voss, who's very well known in the industry. We were doing a lot of work of really getting under the skin of who are our most valuable guests, not who's the person who stayed the most nights in our program, but who's the most profitable. And we were coming up with programs to recognize our most valuable, most profitable guests. And Roland gave me the piece of advice. He said, look, don't worry too much about building out programs. Just tell us who they are. If you tell us who the guests are, our most valuable guests, leave it to us. We know how to deliver great experience. And it proved to be true. If you try and sort of do too many standard operating procedures and programs, it can start to become inauthentic. Whereas if you give the operators, hey, here's the most important, most profitable guests we got coming in, they'll figure out how to deliver it.
Moving on to resolution number 4, use money as the tool, not the goal. I pulled this one from episode 48. That's what the money's for. The truth about wealth, according to Investopedia editor-in-chief, Caleb Silver. Caleb pointed out the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Wealth, he reminded us, is all about time. And today, more than ever, having money is not just about saving for a rainy day. It's about spending intentionally on the things or the people that matter. Taking that bucket list trip with your family, attending that once-in-a-lifetime concert with friends, planning that weekend getaway that gives you space to breathe. Because, as Caleb said, that's what the money's for. Here's a clip from the episode.
that it's really one brick at a time, right? They're not going to, a lot of people walk around saying, I should have got in on that stock, or I should have bought at the lows, and the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And literally, that's just a waste of breath and a waste of time. It's one brick, $1, $20 at a time, but it's consistency over time. That's one thing about building wealth. It doesn't happen overnight. It's the time part of it that's the magic, and that's hard for people to swallow. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Now you're going to read about, see it on the gram everywhere you look about people that made it real fast, right? Or got rich real fast. But I want people to understand the difference and know it in their heart and soul between being rich and being wealthy, and which one is more important to you. Now I have my own definition for both, and rich, I think we see all the time. It's the drip, it's the whip, it's all the stuff on Instagram and Snap and all over social media, because that gets our attention, that, gets our animal spirits cooking, howling at the moon. But wealth is the ability to afford your time. The most valuable asset you actually have is your time. Think about it. You're a mom. Every second counts for you, and that's the way it is for everybody. You're stretched thin. You got to make sure you're doing the best you can in every aspect of your life. But your time is the thing that's most important. So wealth, actual wealth, is the ability to say, I can do this because I can afford a sitter to come, or I can do this because I can take a couple of days off to be with my kids for those health appointments or that trip to wherever, Disney or whatever it is that's important to you. The ability to say that, to be able to make those decisions without saying, I don't know if I can't afford this. That's the difference. And I don't think people focus enough on that. I think, again, they're focused on the number. They're focused on what other people are doing. They're focused on what they see, not who am I and who do I want to be in the future, and how do we back a number into that?
So you're not going to give us the magic pill or get rich quick scheme. There is no secret that we can all do instantly, like Instagram says.
Yeah, if I had it, I wouldn't be talking to you, or I'd be talking to you from my yacht.
Hey, exactly. We'd be on the yacht together.
And in the Mediterranean, I would be, cashing in some cryptocurrency in exchange for fine bottles of wine somewhere off the coast of Italy. But no, I don't have it. But I do know that the magic is in not worrying too much about it, but just being consistent about the investing, and then doing that big check-in every couple of years or so and saying, okay, am I in the right investments? Look how much of this has grown, because we'll go through periods of time. And this happened over the last 5 years. Coming out of the pandemic, stock market fell 34%. And then it went up 100% in 2.5 years. Like, if you're missing that, because you're worried that, or you don't trust it, or you don't think you have $50 to invest, you're missing some of the greatest runs in generations. And who knows when those will come around again. Or if you were, worried, like we all are, about a mounting deficit, or the election, or who's sitting in the Oval Office, or what's going to happen to the Federal Reserve chair, or all the things that financial media, guilty as charged, want you to worry about and pay attention to, and you're not just doing the thing, investing over time, watching it compound, staying consistent, staying in it, rain or shine, sleet or snow, then you're missing out on the ability to generate wealth.
Next up, resolution number 3, stay focused. This one comes from episode 62. This founder bet on AI 11 years ago. Now the industry is catching up, with Richie Kandalwal, co-founder of Price Labs. Richie said something deceptively simple. Decide on the problem you want to solve and solve it. Distraction is everywhere. Opportunities, meetings, invitations, they're endless. This year, I'm committing to one filter. Does this move me one step closer to my goal? If the answer is no, I'm saying no. Let's hear from Richie.
I'm extremely lucky to be in this industry, hospitality industry. Happened here by chance, right? But I think this is one of the best industries anyone could build a software for, or I say software, but anything in this industry, right? And we have a ton of team members who come from various other industries and join Price Labs and go to shows and events and conferences, and they're just struck by the welcoming nature and the helping nature of everyone in the industry. So firstly, I want to start off and say, hey, if you're building in hospitality tech space, at tech space or anything around hospitality, this is just a fantastic industry to be in. You're going to find the nicest of folks who are going to be welcoming, who are going to be helpful, etc. Right? And from there, I think then you just, for any entrepreneur, not just hospitality, but I think of three things that are very, very crucial. One, having the right focus, right? Decide the problem that you want to solve. Make sure it's a decently sizable enough problem, right? And then just double down and solve it, right? Double down and try to solve it. I often see people get distracted too often, right? Not by the problem, but by the charm of everything else that comes with solving that problem, right? So it's a focus. Second, I would say you need resilience, right? You need to do the hard yards. You're going to have no story only has an upward curve, right? There is always some downward curve, something, etc. Right? Price Labs, our favorite moment is I'd moved back to India and we just started setting up our team in India in Feb of 2020, and then March of 2020, COVID happened. And we were just like, what?
We're like, I have this great idea. We're going to build a tech company in the travel space. COVID.
Exactly. Right? And then, and I'd just gotten married 2 months before that. And so it was all just like, and COVID happens and you're like, now suddenly you're spending 14 hours. Every customer's like, hey, we can't pay our invoices, or can you do extensions, or we just need to cancel, or whatever else, right? I just think, like, as a founder, you need resilience. Everyone's going to have all kinds of ups and downs. Sometimes they happen weekly and they're small. Sometimes they last a month. Sometimes they last a few months. But you just need the resilience. And then last, I would say, is adaptability. And I'm thankful again for where you started, having traveled globally. Sometimes you put yourself in uncomfortable positions when you're living outside your own world, right? Outside your own box, right? And that helps you be adaptable. But I think adaptability is the last thing that I would say, right? You need to, you don't have to be super tight to your beliefs, your principles. You have to adapt. Sometimes maybe your idea is not going the way you want. You have to adapt, or something else happens and you have to adapt, right? But going back, fantastic industry to build in, but make sure you focus, have resilience, and then be adaptable.
And now we have resolution number 2, have more patience. While this might sound like it's in relation to my kids, this one actually comes from episode 37, How This Founder Built the Tinder for Hotel Tech, with Jasmine Saliga, founder and CEO of Afixify. Jasmine shared metaphors and advice that I'm genuinely still thinking about, especially her reminder that progress doesn't always look loud or fast. Sometimes patience isn't passive, it's deeply strategic. Let's hear her explain.
There's a saying we use in our house that plants, so if you think about planting a tree, they say, and I'm like a rookie gardener, I'm nowhere near a green thumb, but they say in the first year they sleep, in the second year they creep, and in the third year they leap. So sleep, creep, and leap. And so we always go back to that, my husband and I, in our home, especially with the business, is like, okay, sleep, and is it creeping? And then it's going to leap. But you're not going to see that growth unless you look, right? Like we planted some apple trees back there, and I looked at them, I'm like, these look really good. And he's like, oh, it's their leap year. We're in year 3, it's their leap year. But if I hadn't looked, how would I know? So
It is. It's so wild how quick time goes. My daughter is about to turn 3. And you're like, how is she a person? Like she was this blob of a baby not that long ago. And we blink. But if we don't start something, if we don't plant the tree in the first place, we don't get to blink and get to the leap year, like you said.
yes. Oh, and congrats, by the way. 2.5 to 3 is I'm in that same boat with my youngest. So it's fun, wild. They have opinions. It's crazy.
Yeah. 90% of the time it's wonderful. 10% you're like, you might break me today.
We're like, I call my almost 3-year-old, like he's kind of the king of the castle sometimes. And even his older brothers are like, what does Judah need? But anyways, yes. So I agree. And I do think it's that. So yes, it's that first step. We all want like the rain of success, so to speak. But if you never put the seeds in the ground to start, nothing's going to come up. And I'm really into this. I mean, if you saw my LinkedIn post last week, like I'm really into this like plant parallel because it's so true. I think there's things in nature, there's things that we can parallel. But if you're not planting those seeds, then you can't expect anything to sprout up. But so we have to be faithful. We have to show up every day. Stephanie calls it being in our seat, right? We just try to be in our seat every day, do what it is we know we need to do, and trust the rest will come.
And finally, resolution number 1, prioritize rest. This comes to us from episode number 60, The Power of Silence, Practical Tips for Rest and Reflection with the CEO of Optimistic Theory, Dr. Brittany Connors. As a go New Yorker myself, this genuinely might be my hardest resolution yet. Dr. Brittany challenged the idea that rest is indulgent, irresponsible, or reserved for the privileged. She reframed silence and stillness as essential, not optional. She reminded us that rest doesn't have to mean a week-long retreat in Bali. Sometimes it's just 2 minutes of silence. Sometimes it's letting go of chasing the gold star just to do something simply because it's good for you. Let's hear what she had to say.
Starting from the front of it, I think what I really tried to do was have the realization that a lot of my perception of time was belief. So I believed that I didn't have time to stop, or I believed that to be successful, I needed to be at these events, or I believed that to show my love or my gratitude for something that I had to show up in person a certain way every time. And I realized that that just wasn't true. It was out of habit. It was out of either personal expectation or things that I maybe had seen modeled by my family or friends or like my work environments. And it really was a full stop that like, it's not true. It's just a belief. So if I believe that I can take time to slow down, then it can be possible. And it also was the realization of I have to schedule it. It's not just going to happen. And I have to communicate about it. So the feeling of missing out, not being invited to things, missing something that my dad needed, I realized that with more planning up front, I could counter some of those things. And what allowed me to do was using my ability to ask for help. So looking at asking for help as a new skill that I could use. I recently heard somebody say that like delegation is a trust building tool. I had never thought about it like that, but it gave me the realization that even though I'm a little sister, you know, I'm the youngest of my parents' children, that I still can be a leader and I have a voice. So it did feel strange telling people that were older than me, because at the time, like I was in my mid-20s. It did feel strange to have to tell a 50, 60-year-old or my siblings who are in their 30s and 40s what to do, but I had to get real comfortable with that real fast, or my life was going to be hectic when it didn't need to be, just so I could make other people happy. That's the realization that came from that. And so when I realized that other people through conversation were having very similar struggles as me with like the communication, actually blocking the time, I had to create a framework. So I started doing a goals format, which is GOALS. So I never go anywhere without gratitude and optimism. We know in those times where things are changing for our families, there are tough times, you need something that's going to help you keep going. So what can I look forward to? What am I grateful for? What's going well right now? So I never go anywhere without that. Then the activity, the A, is the silence for, you know, however I could muster. If I had a goal, say, okay, I did 1 hour today, I want to do an hour and a half. Then it's the L and the S with the learning and the sharing. So that's really the ability to reflect in that learning portion, what came up for me. And then if I could tell a friend, if I could tell my dad how I was feeling, I made it a point to communicate what it was like and what it took for me to actually take a break and enjoy that silence. And what is something that maybe we could try together. That invitation is what makes the pressure come down, because it's like, no, I'm not incompetent. I am still worthy even when I need a break. And like, how can we do more of that together to where no one feels like they have to go in a corner and get themselves together, but we can pick a new activity and do that together. If we're just sitting here reading a book, if we're sitting here and we're just enjoying the presence of each other, what are more of those things that we can co-create? And so from that, that's where I took it to, okay, what would this look like in a business or an organization? What does this look like for a family? I'm currently single. I have no kids. So my friends would be looking at me like, well, you can do that. You have time. Again, that's a belief. You also have time. We have the same 24 hours. It might look different, but you can look at your schedule and your family routine and cadence and say, you know what? This is like the one time a week where maybe we're all at home. There are no games. There are no business meetings, or I want to put that there and we're going to practice together trying to attain that. So that's the evolution of something that was very personal, creating a framework and then bringing it to all of these various sectors to where it made sense and it actually worked for people.
You just blew my mind in so many ways. I also kind of feel like my therapist sent you to talk to me. Everything you were just saying about, the beliefs of like, well, I need to be doing this or I need to be working harder. I don't have the time to take rest. Building it into your day, being able to communicate that it's important to you. And I want to go back to the goals framework because I think that's such a succinct way of reminding yourself what's important along the way. But one thing you had mentioned was about communicating it to your family who largely are older than you. What was the response when you started to say things like, I need to prioritize silence and I need to prioritize rest? I would imagine maybe some of the older generation, laughed at that or thought it was ridiculous. Or like you said, you don't have a family. What do you need quiet for? Like, did you have any naysayers come out?
Yes, Katie. Yeah, absolutely. Everything you just described, I've experienced it, from anger, confusion, frustration, almost like it almost felt elitist at some point. Like, oh no, it's a privilege for you to be able to do. Oh, I got all of that. My parents, they are in the generation where they just didn't get it. Oh, they saw people work, and that's all you did was work, right? I would say like generations under was more so like, okay, we're kind of jealous. We wish we could live that life, but good for you. There were a few people that honestly, it made them stop in their tracks because I became a mirror to them. Like, man, I never stop. And I feel bad about that, but I still don't know how. How are you doing it? It for some people, it
That's
was
where
like,
I am right now. I feel like I'm like, okay, I hear you now. Teach me your ways.
It was an immediate raised hand. And I love those moments because, again, that's an invitation. But yeah, the naysayers were the hardest because it started to feel like a question of, do I love you or not? Or are you still going to love me when I prioritize me? Are we going to get to a point where you can be okay that I'm not going to answer that call or I'm not going to show up? And it was hard. I did cry about that. I was really scared about hurting, damaging relationships. But there was an initial shock. And then it became like, oh, but you're healthy. You get up and you run. You have energy. Now I think there's something to this. Now I would like for you to tell me more, or I can respect that you do this. And like, I think one of my favorite instances was my mom, because she was the oldest of 10 and her mother was really sick when she was young and they were only 13 years apart. So my mom was really like a second mom in her household. And so it makes me emotional even today because now my mom can relax. That is something she could not do. I think about all the things she taught me, all the things she modeled. I never saw her model rest. And it's not her fault. But because of the generation that she came from, she never saw it. And so now that's something we can do together. And I'm hoping that in the future, if I ever have kids, that I can model that for my family. So yeah, I got the range of emotions, but now it's like, oh no, don't call Brittany. She's not going to, they're telling other people for me. They're protecting my time because they know how valuable and impactful it was for me, but it's also trickled to them. And now they have their own time and space where they do the same thing in their own way.
Wow. Yeah, this is. I'm kind of debating about sharing something because it's quite personal, but
Can you?
I'm very similar. That is what I was, what I saw when I was growing up as well, was that kind of real incredible work ethic. And I'm so grateful for that because that's where mine comes from.
Yep.
But I have a real hard time slowing down, stopping, prioritizing myself. Like everything you said about putting your needs first or asking for help, very difficult things to do. And when I had my second child, a couple of months back, that was the first time I really allowed myself for like a week or two. It wasn't even as long as it probably should, to be like, I'm doing nothing else aside from caring for this child and watching television. Like that is all I am doing during this time. And you have this like real emotional wave that comes from all the hormones and everything. And because I wasn't showing up and taking care of my dad, my sister, the way that I always do we're talking like 5 days. I had a really challenging conversation with my dad where he actually called me selfish. And in that moment was this kind of like, wow, like I have to take care of me and I have to prioritize me because if I don't, no one else will. So I think what you're sharing here today, particularly around the holidays where people are going into tricky family dynamics or losses of loved ones or things, Christmases or Hanukkahs or Kwanzas that don't look the way that they used to look.
Yes.
You to be here to teach us that it's not only okay, but we will get to some practical, tactical ways that during this hectic time, we can actually do it is just so powerful.
It is. And can I say something about the selfish comment? Because I received that too. It appears as selfishness when you put the self into the center. And we are normally taught that that is a bad thing. When we don't see it done well, when we don't talk about the work that it takes to even make that possible, it makes sense that it feels and seems and appears selfish. When we get the opportunity to put ourselves and prioritize ourselves in a way that people can see the difference, that's how you know you're doing it well. So for anybody who's watching or listening, when you get these responses, I want you to know that this is very typical. I want you to know that you're on the right track and that it is an affirmation for you to keep going and having these challenging conversations. And invite the people that are maybe calling you or this act selfish, calling them in and helping them find their own times. And then help them see the reframe of how we can come back better. We can have our social batteries recharge. We can actually show up truthfully and not hide in shame or be a wreck and still show up. Because when people only see the outcome, they don't know the process that brought you there. Let them into your process.
And there you have it, our top 10 New Year's resolutions for 2026, inspired by some of our amazing episodes from 2025. I hope hearing from these incredible hospitality leaders, executives, and innovators has left you feeling as inspired and as grounded as I do heading into the year ahead. We'll link all the full episodes in the show notes in case you want to revisit any of these conversations in full. And with that, I'll say, here's to doing scary things this year, to staying focused, and to leaving space for the unexpected. Let's each build a life and a career that feels like our own personal definition of success. I want to wish you a happy, healthy, and of course, hospitable 2026 ahead. Happy New Year, everyone. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.